Thank you. Okay, and now we're going to screen share. And I will tell you my second intro is even better than my first. So as I was saying, Carl Jung sort of kicked this whole thing off, and these are patterns of behavior, not unlike being identified as either an introvert or an extrovert. And I am by nature an introvert, but I have become extroverted because it's the life path I was on, even though it wasn't necessarily what I saw for myself. And so archetypes fit in that same category. They're ways that we describe ourselves and recognize patterns in ourselves. But essentially, archetypes are neutral. And what that means is that the terminology or the words can get in the way because people have a hard time thinking about whether or not they have a saboteur because that has such a negative connotation. But in fact, every archetype has this light side, which is the lesson that we can learn from it. And in order to learn the lessons that we can learn from the archetypes, if you followed my series in December, you know how many there are.
Turned off.
Somebody's not.
We have video here.
Pat Caffrey, please mute.
Sorry, I thought I was.
Okay, you're not. So I just wanted to share the yin-yang symbol with you in order to remind you that when we look at these archetypes, we're thinking about both a light and a shadow side. Now, I find the archetypes particularly informative, which is really what we're talking about today, from a creative perspective, partly because of the lessons that they have to share. And one of the things that I did, and I encourage people to do this, but there's never an obligation, is that using a system that Caroline Myss, the theorist, came up with, and according to her belief and understanding of all of this, we have particular archetypes that resonate more with us than others. And so last year, to kick off the year, I did a series of archetype cards. And here you see 3 of the cards of archetypes that I relate to in a very strong way in my life. So I feel as though I have a very strong pioneer, and I think I know I've got a darn strong rebel, and the shadow side has come out there more than once. And I also know that I have a pretty heavy duty judge. But if you think about the judge from this perspective of the yin yang, the shadow side of the judge is, yes, passing judgment on people and on ourselves creatively. You know, who hasn't said or thought to themselves at least once, I'm no good at this. Everybody else is better at this than I am. That's the judge shadow side coming up. And the lesson is to be non-judgmental or less judgmental, not only of yourself, but of others. And so that's how we can begin to understand. And part of what we do in CST is that we encourage people to look at archetypes in a way that helps them identify which patterns are strongest in their own lives. Now, in order to make some of that clear without it all being about me, I pulled some images from the first catalog that we did last year that was an archetype exhibition. In CST, which is Creative Strength Training, every year we have a members exhibition, which is inclusive. Everybody can enter. If you want to. All you have to do is have some good pictures. But then toward the end of the year, we do a show that's specifically about archetypal themes and how people have been working with them. And that can be all over the place, which is why I pulled out this sort of an assortment to share with you briefly here. So this is Marilyn George, and we have people from all over the world. She lives in New Zealand, and this is her child, and this is actually an image of her and a collage of materials and fabrics that she created and stamps that she has had in her collection for years. And each of the images that she used in this piece relates in some way to how she saw herself as a child. And a child is one of the most significant archetypes because every human being has a child archetype. And from a creative perspective, getting in touch with your child archetype helps you reconnect with the part of you that would just love to spend a little time playing. We had a retreat a couple of years ago, and at the retreat, which was in person, we did what was called the Squiggle bird game, where you just take a doodle and then you turn the doodles that you've made into little birds and add wings and add beaks. It seems very childlike, and it is. Could seem kind of dumb if you're judgmental, but on one hand, this is sort of a freeing thing, and we all had a lot of fun with it. And in this case, Linda Vandiver turned hers into a quilted piece when she got home. And so she was having some fun with her child archetype in a different way. The child archetype actually falls out into some subcategories. So there's a nature child and there's a magical child, and most of us relate to one more than we relate to the others. But one of the archetypes within the child archetype that we have to acknowledge is the orphan child. And sometimes the orphaning happened, unfortunately, in real time, but sometimes becoming an orphan has to do with family circumstance or other siblings who dominated in the family, so that the less outgoing child never felt like she quite felt in or fit in. And this is from Jeanette Davis. And Jeanette Davis grew up with 1 foot in another culture and 1 foot in US culture, and often felt as though she was hiding in plain sight, which is where the name of this piece came from. The seeker is another archetype that people can relate to, and that can be in a spiritual way, as it is for Linda Miller. But other people recognize the seeker in themselves because they are always looking for new techniques, and they're always thinking about meaning, or they're always in some way on a path of discovery. And so this piece, which is another art quilt, is an example of the elements that meant something to Linda when she started thinking symbolically about the seeker. And that's one of the things I love creatively about archetypes, is that each of us, if we give it enough time, can take any archetype that sounds as though it might be a fit or be familiar to us, and start thinking about it in such ways that we can actually come up with design elements, whether we work abstractly, which is the focus of a lecture next week, or whether we work figuratively. There are colors and there are shapes that can have meaning in our work. And when we learn to bring those into the work that we do, we are creating work which is distinctive and personally our own. And that's a very satisfying thing, because it leads to really feeling joy around the work that you're doing. I loved this series from Annie Centano in 2020. She did every month, used an Altoids tin, which you probably recognize here, and embellished and just made these amazing little collages, freestanding collages, 3-dimensional, that were based on either the archetype we were studying or an archetype that felt familiar to her. So this particular month, we were talking a lot about the Bully archetype. And if we think about this neutral aspect of archetypes, the shadow obviously is the bully, who literally does bully other people into agreeing with them, or gets people to back down. Or we may have experienced the bully in our own lives, which is what Annie's referencing here, the Meritorious Achievement Award for Bullying Survivor and Defeater Medal. And the light or positive side or lesson of the bully is to recognize when someone else is bullying us, how to stand up to that. And many of us are familiar with the words to that song, I Am Woman, from Helen Reddy, that you see inside this small tin. You can bend but never break me. And so the lesson in this case is to stand tall, but sometimes we have to take a hard look at ourselves and see when we ourselves have been a bully in a certain circumstance. And that's hard to face sometimes, but the fact is, as human beings, we've all had moments that were less than stellar. I know I've had at least half a dozen, and maybe you have too. And so I think that self-reference is equally important. Another piece of Annie's, this was her artist. And she uses a really great collection of images of herself, the little girl in the pink dress, and then these other appropriated images that she has just pulled from the marvelous stash that she has on hand. I love the spools of thread as the wheels for the cart. Paula Dean is very interested in dyeing and using what's called a ruling pen, and created pieces. Actually, what Paula wrote, excuse me, about her work is that rather than planning the piece and executing the piece, knowing what it's going to look like from start to finish, which is one reason I want to share work like this. Lots of people think, oh, well, I could never do this because I don't have ideas. I just work spontaneously. Paula works spontaneously. She starts in with the dying, and then the face reveals itself. And then she said to me in an interview that I did with her last year, the meaning of it comes to her toward the end and not at the very beginning. And so this piece, Unstoppable, is a beautiful whole cloth art quilt, and this is her Rebel. This is her Survivor piece, which references the saboteur. And the saboteur, of course, we all recognize that because we're capable of sabotaging ourselves, and we do it by procrastinating and by thinking that perfection is the only way to go. I wrote an essay about this in December. If you read that, you're already familiar with the downside of the saboteur. But the light side of the saboteur is to learn to embrace yourself and to refute sabotage from the outside, and to refute sabotage, inner sabotage, in just that same way. And so if you look closely, depending on the device that you're on, you may see that there are a lot of words that have been written on the garment of this person. And they're all positive. Self-acceptance, good and bad, you've got it all, go for it. Keep promises to yourself. Never mind change. This is from Sherry Schneider, and this is another saboteur piece. So you see it can go many directions. It can be quilting, it can be collage, it can really, the choice of materials within CST, they're all over the place, but in a general sense, what we're talking about when we're talking about creativity and archetypes, whether you represent archetypes and choose to play with that for a while, or whether it's archetypes influencing the other work you make, in either situation, whatever materials you use are what you will use. So there aren't any absolutes about, well, it has to be this or it has to be that. It doesn't have to be any damn thing. It can be whatever you want it to be. And this from Lynn Wall represents her entire committee of archetypes. Sometimes committee has a negative overtone to it because we think about the people that we want to please or who are not approving of us. But we talk a lot about the fact that when we know who the negative committee is, we can turn it into the cheering section by inviting people onto the committee who are there to support us and who we will support in return. And so you see, it's another one of those two-sided yin-yang aspects of life, is that we can have the naysayers. And when we know who the naysayers are, then the best thing to do is to avoid them and go with those who are not naysayers, because life is short and we all have a right to be supported and happy. Beautiful piece from Barb Matthews, and maybe a little late at this point, but all of the addresses for these artists are included on the images. And this particular presentation in its entirety of this archetype exhibition is on my website if you wanted to go and look more. But Barb represented work from a different perspective. These pieces that she made, and of which we see here just one, are actually a beautiful synthesis of dyed silk fabric and plexiglass that have been combined using a special sort of secret process that Barb has developed. And from Barb's standpoint, she was really working with the help of the engineer archetype, figuring out how to engineer these pieces that aren't necessarily about specific archetypes in and of themselves, as much as they were created with the help of her artist, her inner artist and her inner engineer for sure. And when she talked about this piece in the artist statement that she wrote, she talked about how perfectionism has tormented her most of her life, and that the work that she was doing, as is true of this particular piece, was a coming to terms with that torment that perfectionism can cause. You know, if you're suffering because of judgment towards yourself, that's completely unnecessary. This is from Zoe Holzknecht, and she did a whole series last year that was polymer clay. One of her goals for herself was to learn to use polymer clay more interestingly and effectively than she had up to that point. And I think she succeeded. The entire set of 12 is really magnificent. And she set them into silver and used this same format across the series. But the elements and the symbolism on each of the individual necklaces was separate from the others. It's from Kristen Rohr, who works in kind of an intuitive stitching way, literally not looking at the fabric and stitching for the first part of what she does as her exploration. And then once she has certain parts of it stitched, she becomes more intentional. And of course, these are very abstract pieces, and that's true of abstraction in a general sense. I can look at it and see the beautiful stitching and the balance of the colors and the forms. When Kristen was working on it, she was definitely having a strong sense of the nature child in her being in the flow. And here we have a piece from Janie Crook, and I encouraged Janie to join CST. She was just retiring and had not done very much creatively. She was all over the place the first year. She was a little bit nervous, a little bit tentative, but she blossomed in the environment that she was in. She literally bloomed where she was planted. And she entered this piece, which was the first piece she had ever entered anywhere, and named it Out of the Box. And I thought it was such an appropriate example of how we can foster this in each other by creating a creative environment, and how we can further understand ourselves and take our work to a deeper place with the help of the understanding that we can come to when we've had a chance to read and think about archetypes as they relate to what we do and to ourselves as human beings. And so I just had to share a piece from a brand new member last year and say that Janie joined again rather enthusiastically in 2021 and had a total blast and did even more outstanding things. And so if anything, it's a great example and inspiration of the fact that it's never too late to get started, and your work can go wherever you want it to go, as long as you embrace that inner child and show up to do some of the work. And in this case, the work was play, and what could be better than that? So I hope that's a little bit of an introduction for anyone who is new to this. I'm happy to take questions. As I said before, you can ask me anything. It doesn't necessarily have to only be about archetypes, but if there's something that you'd like to know that I didn't cover, or if you're in CST currently and you'd like to speak up about something, I'd be happy to include your thoughts here too. I thought about sharing some work of my own because I've actually been working with this idea of archetypes since 2002, when I read the first book by Carolyn Mace on the subject. And because I have a background in psychology and religion and am a self-taught artist, it really resonated with me. And over the past, what is that now, 20 years, it really has given me more of a sense of purpose in my own work. And I've always been convinced that when we put our hearts into our work and we know why we're working and have our intentions set, whether we realize we've done that or not, that the work that we make when it's seen by the public really touches viewers as much as it touched us. It may not be the same sort of an effect, but it definitely has that. When you've poured yourself into something, you've put a lot of emotional energy there that's stored up. And when people look at your work, if they're taking it seriously, they completely get that. And I think that's one of the benefits of being an artist and being a creative. Yes, Beverly. Thanks for breaking.
Hi, Jane. Hello. Hi. You mentioned a book by Carolyn Mace. What was the book?
The book is called Sacred Contracts, and it's still in print. And if you're mainly into, it's a pretty dense book, to tell you the truth. There's a lot more in it than just the archetypes. Those are just a subset of what she talks about. And I realize this isn't necessarily for everybody. So what I would recommend is that you go to her website first, which is, her last name is pronounced Mace, but it's spelled M-Y-S-S. So it's myss.com. And if you type in Gallery of Archetypes, the whole back part of her book is reproduced there on the website. So you can just read about archetypes and get a little bit of background there. Although on my website now, we have put up several things that are meant to help people understand this. Since my interest in it, of course, I'm interested in it from the broader view of life in general, but I'm also particularly interested in it because of the perspective it brings to creativity and making. And so the things that we have on my own website are more driven by that kind of what's the point that anyhow, that's where I'm coming from, and that's really what it's about on the website there. And that's pretty much the emphasis in what we do in CST.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Jane.
Welcome. Joyce.
Hi, Jane, what is a ruling pen?
Oh boy, I knew you'd ask me that, and Paula works full time. I'm not sure exactly how she uses it, but I think it's actually some kind of, if anybody knows, feel free to just unmute and tell us. But essentially it's a pen that Linda, can you address that?
Yes, I can. If I can get this up here where you can see it. This is a ruling pen. It has two pieces to come together, and you can judge the gap between it by the little screw here. It's used a lot by watercolor people to put down the resist. It's used by drafters to get very, very fine lines in their drawings with India ink, and also works with paint if you thin the paint down to the same consistency as India ink. They also, some of the drafting tools that are compasses will have a ruling pin attachment that you can use so that you can draw perfect circles with it. Obviously, I've just bought this because Paula's going to give us a little class in a group we are with her. So I haven't as yet actually used it, but I can just see from looking at it that it's a very, very fine pen, and I've got about 3 or 4 that came in the set she recommended. But did I just over answer your question?
Kind of. Do you load that pen with some type of fluid?
Yeah.
Yes, with India ink or very thin resist or very thin acrylic paint.
Okay. And what was the set that she recommended?
I don't have the name of it. I know I'm trying to remember what her website is.
I'll see if I can come up with that, and
but you can go to her website, and if you order it through her website, she gets a little kickback from Amazon.
Okay, great. Yeah, if I can have that.
It comes in a set of 4, the one you order from her, 3 different sizes, and then a fairly different size shape one that looks more like this.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll check with her, and if it's okay with her, which I assume it will be, because I know she's developing a class that she'd like to eventually teach online about this. I'll share her website and we'll put it with the link for this recording, so that when you get the link for this recording, you don't have to watch the recording again, but you will be able to at least look for that and go straight there. That should be helpful. Thanks, Linda.
Thanks, Linda.
You're welcome.
Linda, would you like to say more? You've never overspoken in my estimation of you.
Yeah, when you were showing the artwork that people had done, you talked about Barb, who had the engineer and perfectionism. And I have an engineer, and we all have that saboteur. And the lesson I have learned from my engineer is when perfection is needed. Certain things will not work unless they're perfect. But other than that, then my engineer tells my saboteur to get out of here and quit trying to make things perfect when they don't need to be perfect. So that's from the light side of my engineer.
I love that. Well, you're reminding me of one of Zena's uncles who had, Zena had 2 cousins who were close in age to her. And so this uncle was relevant for all 3 of them. And he said one time, you have to decide in school when a B is good enough and when to pour your energy into the A's. And I've never forgotten that. I thought it made a lot of sense. So And I don't know whether that would be a lesson of the teacher archetype also, but there's a good chance it might be. And it's definitely the saboteur, because we all know how perfectionism can just kill a project and take all the joy right out of it. And yet all of it, many of us really struggle with that to the point of being shut down by it. So, well, let's see if I can come up with another archetype story. Do we have another question?
Jane, I have a question. Sure. And for some reason, I don't have the raise your hand icon, oddly. This is Victoria. How are you? Long time no see. It's great to hear your voice, and I'm reminded of what a fantastic teacher you are when I hear it. I've retired, sort of, and I'm living in Mexico now, and have spent a year here thinking, oh, I'll have all this time to do my art, and can't seem to get focused. So this sounds like I just watched the recording from your recent Zoom, which was very helpful. I was just wondering if there's a limit to the number of participants, if it ever gets, I've taken some Zoom classes, and sometimes it seems like there's too many participants. How do you handle a great volume?
Well,
is that an issue?
It has never been an issue yet, and I'm not sure. I mean, maybe it's an issue I would love to have, to tell you the truth.
Right.
It has grown enough that I know I'm on the right track, and I know it really helps people. And it has enabled me to hire my daughter full time. So that counts for a lot, because she brings all kinds of things to the table that I don't know how to do, and I will never in this lifetime know how to do. And I think that's one of the reasons it's helped us to keep it from feeling too big, because we do these meetings that everybody can attend, and not everybody wants to talk. Some people want to just watch and listen. Mm-hmm. And in addition to that, we have these topical groups that we came up with during the pandemic, just out of the blue. We had the time, and I talked about those briefly on Wednesday, but for anybody who wasn't there to hear that, I think that being able to, let's use this example. So there's a graduating class in a high school, or a university would be better. And within the graduating class, people all eventually, if it's a small class, like where I went to college, maybe there were, I don't know how many, maybe 200 people in my graduating class. We all sort of got to the point of knowing each other because we crossed paths in various places. We saw each other at social events and that. But it was the cohort of people who were also psychology majors that I really got to know. And by getting to know that cohort of psychology and religion majors, and then by dating somebody who was a brass player in the School of Music, that expanded my interest, so that then I started knowing a bunch of musicians. And so I didn't know everybody in the group as well as I knew some people, but I felt really at home with the whole group because we had this shared experience. And so right now, I've never ever, and maybe this isn't the sort of thing someone would say to me as open as be, I've never had anybody say it was just too big and I didn't enjoy it because I felt it was too impersonal. And I think we go the distance. I answer every single email I get every single week. Wow. And I made a choice when we started thinking about what this could really be and how significant and how much impact it could have. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't see people coming up now and blossoming. Yeah, so I don't have an art practice of my own that much anymore. I do botanical printing and I love it, but I'm not dedicated to making 18 pieces that are museum quality and museum size. I had that, I did that. It was fabulous when I did it. But I really decided when I hit 60, which is 7 years ago now, that it was time for me to get in gear with what I had in my late 40s and 50s, which is that I wanted to be a wise woman and not resent anything when I got older, because it just seemed to me it soured life for people that I was watching. And I realized that one of the ways that I could be a wise woman, a wise artist, was to make every effort to sort of switch my sphere of my center in a way, and to make it more outer directed instead of inner directed. And so I love answering emails. This month, I hated being so lonely. So I set these calls up so we could do this, and those things are just an example, I think, of how we try to set a tone and offer opportunities to people so that they feel included. And I see Kristen has her hand up, so she might even be willing to address some of that since this was her.
And
Go.
a great response, a great answer. Thank you for that. And I love your dedication to teaching and your approach to teaching. And I'm amazed at what you're doing. I was with you when the book came out, and to see what it's grown into is fantastic. And I'm excited that I think I'm going to get to be a part of this. So thank you. One more quick question about the scheduling of the meetings and such. Is there a set schedule, and is that something we can know in advance? Because I have a couple of commitments that might not.
Well,
Thank you.
Okay, but where are you in Mexico? Just curious.
I'm in San Miguel de Allende in Guanajuato.
Okay, because I have another friend who moved to Mexico, but she's up in the mountains.
Yeah, that's where I am.
Oh,
I'm
well,
in Central Mexico.
I'll connect you with her.
Excellent, thanks.
So some of the times are set. We talk about archetypes every month on the second Wednesday of the month at 2:00. We choose the time because we have people like Beverly, who was on earlier, who are in the UK, and it's winding down toward bedtime. And in New Zealand, it's 5 a.m. and people still get up. So I think that speaks to community right there. But the third Wednesday of the month, we have another topic. The fourth Wednesday of the month, we have another topic. So those 2:00 meetings are set all the time. When it comes to the end, sometimes we add special events like the exhibition celebrations, and we come up with that time kind of based on other things that are happening. The topical groups get together and form rather spontaneously. Somebody has to be willing to be a host who knows how to run Zoom. And then those groups get together and they talk about setting a time that works for everybody in the group. And so those are, I don't micromanage. It's really never worked for me. So they let me know what they're doing, and I poke in and join meetings anytime I can without being intrusive. But that's formed as they go along. Okay, Kristen, please.
Yes, I wanted to speak to the question of archetypes, new attendee. Is it too big? Is it inclusive? This was my first year, 2020, and I'm a longtime artist. I'm 78, and I found myself growing in places that I didn't know needed to be grown. I found myself happily involved in one of the small groups called Embroidery Enthusiasts, and wow, it was just a stimulating branch off of CSD. I had a challenge with archetypes because I'd never read anything about them. I didn't know anything about them. I thought I knew who I was on many levels, and learning on the second Wednesday archetype lectures more in depth and hearing the questions from the many people attending, I didn't ever say anything at those meetings. I just sat and took notes and learned and explored my own archetypal structure. So for me, as a first year participant, the world opened up in more ways than I ever imagined possible. I've made some marvelous, amazing friends from my connection. And I don't think that if somehow CST disappeared, any of those friendships would disappear because they're really cemented. The group, it doesn't matter how many people are participating, because the magnetism that pulls people with similar needs, directions, interests is there. And I did deep dive last year, which was a big jump for a first timer, but boy, did I grow, and did I find a community of artists in so many areas of creativity. And everybody supported one another in ways that we all grew. So Jane's comments about not paying attention to numbers really haven't meant anything to me. I can't even tell you how many people were there, except I knew in Deep Dive we had 15. I knew in Embroidery Enthusiasts we had 14, but I didn't know anything else. And I'd go to the big meetings and I'd learn and I'd learn and I'd learn. So if you're wondering about numbers, I would say that's your saboteur just hopping in there and trying to get you to forget about joining because there might be too many people. Don't let that rule. Come along, have fun.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you. Thank you, Kristen. Teresa, please.
Hi, Jane. I am so excited to be involved with this group. Your comments are just so very encouraging because right now I feel completely paralyzed and confused about what my focus is and the direction that I want to take my artwork. I've done quilting, which I still love to do, you know, like wedding quilts and all that kind of stuff. And I've done a couple of abstract things and taken a couple of classes. And I've just recently got involved with a new process called silk fusion. And I'm trying to figure out a way to combine those two because I love the feel of fabric and I love the process of silk fusion. And I'm trying to figure out how to combine the two. Plus, I also like to get in some mixed media techniques. So I'm very confused. And I'm hoping that through this class and with the group's help, I can really get myself focused and feel confident that I can eventually call myself an artist.
Oh yeah, you will. Sooner than you think. You know, you may have heard me say this briefly the other day, but I think it's revisiting. It's worth it to revisit it. One of the concepts that I recognized in my own work, and this is before any book was ever written, this was a while ago, is how very important it is for us to, which we're not encouraged to do. We're encouraged to take lots of workshops, and I've got no complaint with the dilettantes. But being a dilettante is not a bad thing, meaning jumping around and trying lots of stuff. But I do think that there should be more encouragement in the creative realm to know what our preferences are as a way of moving toward alignment. And by alignment, I mean, it's really valuable, so personally valuable to feel as though what you really love to do is where you're spending your time. Mm-hmm. It's not rocket science. Life is short. How much of your life do you want to look back on? You know, when they interview, it's a cliche, when they interview people, I don't know who's interviewing people on their deathbed. That seems sort of grim to me. But what they say is that one thing people say frequently is, I just wish I had done more things that were fun, or I just wish, you know, fill in the blank with that sort of a thing. And I believe in that. I believe that life is short and that we need to get on this task of figuring out what means something to us and what is enjoyable. And we don't even have to be, you can be totally aligned and not even be that good at anything. It doesn't mean being good. It means doing what you feel you're there to do. And if you're there to goof off and play around with lots of different things and you're a happy camper, no one has a right to criticize you for that. And, you know, this is where we can go deeper and learn more about ourselves. And when we do, the good news is, Teresa, it automatically starts to bring things into focus. Because as soon as you decide what you don't want to do anymore, the list of things you do want to do gets clearer.
Okay, thank you.
I use the example of one more thing because I love talking about this. I had on my list, when I made my alignment list of all the things I wanted to do, that's your third list. You do a list of what you're good at. You do a list of of what you love to do, and then you do a list of the things you think you want to learn. Do you know how much mental space that occupies, the things you think you want to learn? I thought I wanted to learn to play the steel guitar. Was I making any effort to learn to play the steel guitar? No, I don't even know what a steel guitar looks like. I just knew what it sounded like. So I dropped that one off my list, and it opened up a place for something else that I really did intend to do. And this is what we do. And you know what? It doesn't have to be threatening or scary. It's actually fun to talk about this stuff, because one thing I love about CST, everybody seems to have a sense of humor. So, and we get pretty good at laughing at ourselves. And the fact that I can say, I've called Zen up and said, oh my God, I read some post on the internet this morning, what somebody else is doing, and my victim has kicked in big time. Am I feeling not good enough this morning? And she can say, well, yeah, that's your victim, all right. What are you going to do about it? And so I'm just trying to give you some real-time examples of how we can use this language, and it depersonalizes these emotional reactions that we have that can shut us down. And so that's one of the values of it. Michelle, I'm glad you're here.
Thank you, Jane.
I just want to add to the comments about the numbers. I want to say, Jane, that you give above and beyond. You give everyone more attention than I've ever seen anyone else do. And I really appreciate that. And you do answer all emails. And I don't know how many people we have in one class, but each and everybody's attention, you give them your attention. You help them along the way, no matter which way they want to go. So it's a great class, and you're a great person.
Thank you. Well, you know what I say, it takes one to know one, Michelle.
Thank you.
Welcome. You're welcome. Yeah, it's important. And I worked a long time to be a good teacher. And by that, I mean, I really thought about what I was doing and what was meaningful in the classroom and what worked and what didn't work. And I wasn't always real good at it. In the early years of the mastery program, I made some mistakes, and I own them. I know what they were. I'm sorry about them. I wish I could rewrite history, but I can't. The main thing is, how are we going to move on from here? And so one thing I learned is that when I'm talking to you, I'm talking to you. And I want to know about you. And fortunately, if we talk about the cornerstones of creativity, the number one cornerstone is curiosity. And I think artists are just automatically curious people. And I think those of us who spend a lot of time interacting with other human beings are also naturally curious and able to get outside ourselves in order to find out more about you. I want to know about you. I already know about myself. Why should I be thinking about that right now? So that's kind of the attitude that we've tried to permeate this whole thing with. Pat Grice, I'm glad to see you.
Hi, Jane. I just wanted to let you know, I'm glad to see you too. You had two questions I saw in the chat. One was, is there a Los Angeles, Southern California group? And then the other one was about, are the Wednesday sessions recorded?
Oh, thank you.
Well, and then for myself, could you talk about I think you had 3 different membership levels. Could you talk about those a little bit, please? You don't have to go in. Thank you.
Yeah, basically there are people who are either introverts or they travel a lot, or for whatever reason, they just figure they're not really going to participate. And so last year we developed the reading level so people could get all the materials and watch all the videos, but they didn't come to the meetings. They don't enter the exhibition. It's like getting your toes wet in CST. And if you were in that, if you enrolled at that level and you really liked it and you wanted to move up, you always could. That's not a big deal. But we wanted to, like I have a friend who actually she ran the exhibitions this year, but next year she's on the road. So she's dropped back down to the reading level because she knows she might not have an internet connection and have time to do all this. And as long as I'm on that track, let me say, we deliberately try to overachieve when it comes to offering content, good content. And that means nobody's going to read everything. Nobody's going to care about everything. And that's all right with me too. So we try to offer the perspectives on the archetypes and thinking about all of this and how it relates to making, and the art tutorials in ways that people can dip in and out and go where they want to go. So that's why there are no assignments. There's nothing like that. The middle level is the immersion level. And the immersion level is the level where anybody who joins has everything. They've got access to all of the meetings. They can enter the exhibitions, come to all the receptions, get all the material, put work up for critique, which I do every month. Consider being a case study, which would mean I would just focus on your work, Pat, and we'd work together to put together a presentation that everybody would benefit from watching, but it would be the development of one person's work. So that's all available at the immersion level. And then the deep dive level I developed specifically for people who really wanted to spend a year focused on their own work with a group of like-minded people that they got to know really well. And as of yesterday, the deep dive was full. So I may open another deep dive, but I have to look at my own time to even know whether that's possible. But that's basically what the 3 levels are. All of everything we do, it's all recorded. So the Wednesday the topical groups record, but they only share with themselves, because I have a great deal of respect for the fact that when you get engaged with a small group, people may share personal things that are not privy. The rest of us don't have any business getting into that. So they usually record, and their recordings are good for about a week. So anybody who missed one who's in the group can watch it, but they handle that completely separately from what we do. So there's no archive of all the topical meetings that anybody could go and watch anytime. That was one of the questions you asked me. And now I don't remember the very first one that you were bringing in from chat.
Somebody asked if there was a group in Los Angeles
Oh,
or California.
The groups are not, they're not regional. They're topical. So there's a botanical printing group, and there was a color group this year, and there's this embroidery enthusiast group that Linda mentioned earlier. Somebody did, Kristen. Last year there were 22 groups, and they were all over the place when it came to things people were in. There's a writing group, but they're all over the country. They're all over the world, which is one of the neat things, is that the writing group had a participant from Scotland, and let's see, Linda's group, and she's going to talk in a minute. Alison Bainbridge from the UK was in her group. So they work out their timing, but they're not topical. And part of the reason we never did it that way was because we were in, our 3rd year was the pandemic, and it wasn't possible to set up get-togethers. Now, if things change in the beginning, the first couple of years, I know there were several people. And I'm looking at Linda on the screen right now, because in the Tampa St. Pete area, there were several people who realized they were in close proximity to each other. So they did get together. And we can help people find out who else is around. We'll do anything we can to help like that. But it's been kind of a moot point for the past 2 years. So Linda, please.
Just as an aside type thing, my relationship with Jane goes back over 20 years now. I think she's one of the finest teachers I've ever had, because she's willing to give you everything she knows, and hope that you take it and make it your very own in your own voice. But I wanted to mention to Teresa, one of the Wednesday groups was a stuck group. And we got together every Wednesday and talked about being stuck and what we could do to get unstuck, and different activities and different suggestions. And they were really, really helpful for a lot of us to get out of that stuck stage and start working again.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda.
Yeah, and another thing, I won't put you on the spot, Linda, but I think you're also a good example of someone who didn't really come easily to the archetypes, and it took a while, but you have really this year, I'll say, if you've joined CST and you're planning to come to the retreat or watch the retreat next weekend, she came up with this most spectacular way of tying sacred geometry to archetypes that just blew my mind. And she's going to share that as part of the retreat. But would you just 2 minutes talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, well, I'll go to the background. I think we started on the archetypes seriously about 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. And the first year I said, well, if Jane's going to do this, I guess I'm going to have to sit around and pay attention, but they're not anything I'm interested in. I'm interested in the art part. They were entering into my mind and doing things to my mind that I wasn't aware that was going on. And each year I became more and more concerned and serious about them. And I tend to look upon the big picture as there isn't an archetype out there that I don't have some connection with, but I do have these 12 that are my specific, more constant with me ones. And so I took the sacred geometry and the circles and put all my archetypes in circles. And then I had all the spaces around the circles that were where the other archetypes fit, so that they, and occasionally one just pushes one of mine out of the way and says, excuse me, I need to be in here. Excuse me, engineer, you don't need to be here right now, but I, as a singer or an artist, need to be here. So I'll just push you out of the way for a time being and take my role over. So that's kind of my philosophy.
Yeah, thanks. Michelle, glad you're here.
Hey, thanks.
Sorry, took me a while to unmute.
That's okay.
I posted Paula Dean's website for the ruling pens if anybody's interested. And you go to her website and you go to my favorite things and it will show that to you. Her website is www.studioonthebluffaltogether.com. And when I purchased mine, there was only like 15 left. And just to let you know.
Great.
And also, I just want everybody to know, I totally agree with Linda and everyone else who has said that Jane is so fabulous, because this woman is more amazing than you'll ever know. And she truly has brought the joy of art into my life and has made me look at things so differently. And I'm just so happy to, and the words, it's just hard to say it, but I'm just so incredibly glad that she is in my life and that she shares everything so completely that she doesn't hold anything back. And anyone who's interested in doing anything with her, you will never, ever, ever regret it. And Jane, thank you so much for everything you do for all of us. We love you.
Well, you know, Michelle, you've humbled me because nobody works in a vacuum. And without the love and support of everybody else who's involved in all of this, none of it would be possible. And I carry with me as kind of a mantra something that I read in Caroline May's book a long time ago, which was, or maybe it was one of her essays online, that she made the comment, which I believe is true about her, that she was just going to keep pouring herself out and pouring herself out and pouring herself out till there was nothing left. And that was the day she would die. And I just thought, that's how I want to be. I want to be like her. I just want to pour myself into this to the best of my ability and make a safe space so that other people can do the same thing. And I'm humbled by your kind words. Thank you. Beverly.
Hi, Jane. Hi, everybody. I was just asking about the groups, the separate groups, like the special interest groups. Can you just join one group or can you join more than one group that interests you?
Well, because they're small and because we form them every year, what I ask is that people choose one that they would really like to be part of or start one, and that we all just join one to begin with so that nobody gets left out and doesn't get to join anything.
Okay.
And life is busy enough that, you know, it goes back to preferences and focus. I think most of the time, putting yourself fully into something requires a certain amount of energy. And if you spread yourself too thin, nobody really benefits from that. So my usual recommendation is to choose one and start with that and then see where that goes.
Okay, fair comment. Okay, thanks, Jane. Okay, bye.
Joyce.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think I was in the first CST group that you ran, the first and second year, and that I couldn't attend last year because of other priorities. But I just want to let everybody know what I'm seeing today that's being offered in CST is so different from what the very first year of CST was. I've seen the growth in the classes that you've done. And I know you're probably tired of everybody singing your praises, but I think it's just a demonstration of how you continue to grow and you pass your growth on to us. I'm so excited about being in CST this year. Like I said, there's so much more than what it was in the first group, the first year. So thank you for continuing your growth and passing it on to us. It's great. If anybody is on the fence about joining CST, get off the fence, join.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you, Joyce. I'm glad you'll be here this year. I'm glad you'll be here this year.
I am too.
I hope that our time has once again run down, and I hope this was it is what it is. We were all over the map today, and that's perfectly fine with me. I hope you got enough of a taste of the archetypes between the presentations and the comments people made and my own stories. There are always more stories to tell, and I hope you'll seriously think about joining us. And if nothing else, please join me next week for the conversation on abstraction, because I'm super excited about that one. And I've put together a really nice presentation, and boy, oh boy, did I learn a lot, which is what I love the most about all of this. So have a great afternoon and good weekend wherever you are, and stay safe. Stay safe. Write to me if you have questions. I'm always here.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Jane.